Welcome to my humble abode. I am Yorkie the Talespinner, and this Tales Over Coffee. Our morning show where we start the day together with a cup of coffee and a narrative tale, in the hopes that we welcome a blessed day. This is Suzerain. The tale of Anton Rain's governorship as president of Sordland. A few days later. Meetings. All over meetings. Report from Ari. Young Swords member claimed links to the government. A detained Young Swords member in Avri claimed that he has connections to the government. We've been investigating the truth of his claims, but we're not able to find any leads. Are there any other reports? No, but there are news items. Sordland politician shot dead. Sordland politician has spoken out about the idea of the dictatorship of the proletariat was shot dead during the evening of Anton Rain's inaugural ball. Yes, we know about Bernard Circus, thank you. Said to have repeatedly received threats from Swedish nationalists. Viewed him as a traitor for promoting millennialism in Sordland. Television footage showed the famous poet's body lying face down. Alright, you're a bit behind the times there. Welfare issues of Nabal. Nabal, a city that was once an important trade centre for the Markian Empire, has been in steep decline over the last decade. We've uncovered the hard truth of the residents themselves. KA-46, a shepherd living near the Cavendish Mountains, that did not wish to disclose his real name, has made shocking remarks about the city's and region's lack of healthcare services. He has waited almost 5 months just to get an appointment in the rural region. Another resident, a farmer, IY-57, who also did not wish to disclose his name, is living in the outskirts of Nabal. His children, AY-14 and VY-16, have to use dangerous mountain paths to walk to their school, located 2 kilometers away, even in the harshest seasons. Murder was a massacre of the past. Radical. Farewell, Bernard Circus. Okay, we know. Rumberg closes consulate. We know. Nothing spectacular and new there. Briefing on the results of the Reform Committee. I came a little early to the meeting room before anyone else showed up. We had scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the Reform Committee regarding a new constitution. I took a seat in the centre chair of the vacant meeting room as I waited for them to show up. The reforms were slowly becoming the most important expectation of my government. We'd be changing Sol's constitution of 29. Most people nowadays blame the constitution for the outstanding problems of the country. On the other hand, the reformers in the Assembly had been getting louder about their demands. What I knew for sure was that I needed to do something about this encroaching chaos before it swallowed me. Meanwhile, Lucian, Pedro and Nia had been leading the committee to prepare an initial draft of constitution amendments. I was intrigued to hear the results. There was a knock at the door. It was Lucian. Good afternoon, sir. Lucian arrived exactly on the hour mark again. His punctuality could almost be described as obsessive. Good afternoon, Lucian. He took a seat on the table and took out a bunch of documents, spreading them on the long table. We should begin the meeting as soon as Mrs. Mogner and Vice President arrives. We finally have some results from the Reform Committee. How does it look? Well, the situation is quite complicated, but I'm sure we'll make it work, just like we accomplished many things before. We'll go over the details regarding the new constitution from the meeting. A moment later, Pedro and Nia also arrived. After a short chat, everyone sat down and took out their notes. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. There is a lot of talk about the future of this process. Let us begin to tackle the points of contention. Mr. President, our committee meetings were really fruitful, and we already started working on the constitutional draft together with the reformists. They demanded a little too much, but I've had success with Franz Richter to create a realistic draft that could potentially go through the Supreme Court. A little. They demanded to rewrite the whole constitution, said Petter. The requests were definitely not outrageous, said Nia. Just not realistic in today's circumstances, just because it wouldn't pass the assembly, nonetheless. I'm glad that we're reaching common ground already. We can reach an agreement with the reformers, said Lucian. We will be very strong in the assembly to propose a change. Can we reach 2/3 majority? If you can get Friends Richter to work with you on this, our only problem would be uniting our own party. We'll never be able to get the NFP to work with us. We need a majority of our 130 seats in the Assembly to vote in favour, with PFJP's full support of 70 votes. We will easily pass the needed 166. But it will be tough to unite the USP, with all the divisive wings that have formed. You must make them follow you loyally. We did it before with the elections. We can do it again. Alvin Clavin and his reformist wing would be supporting you. He already weighed in heavily in favour of the meeting, said Petter. However, the Conservatives would be a tough break. The influence of Sol is still strong in the party. How many votes do they have? Conservatives have around 40 seats. There are many unaligned people, and some of your loyalists might decide to show their true faces too. So we need as many Conservative supporters. And there is only one person who is key to make them backers. Gloria Tory, said Nia. She's well respected by the Solace. She'll be our biggest obstacle in the Assembly, and her demands will be extensive. I also have reasons to think she might be in Osso's pocket. She will be tough to break, but we'll need her help to get the Conservative support. Is it possible to pass the Supreme Court? They are the biggest obstacle, said Lucian. Even if we pass the Assembly, the Chief Judge will do his best to block our amendments. We need at least 6 of the 11 judges to vote for the proposal. But Mr. Hawker has enormous influence with the judges. We should reach out to the judges in secret. Some of them might be willing to break rank and support us, said Petter. All means are to be considered in order to succeed. He was taken aback by the statement. According to the Constitution, I'm a member of the Supreme Court, which means we already have 1 vote. 2 of the judges are friends of mine and of similar opinion about the reforms. Consider them with me, that's 3. Who else would be willing to support reforms? I think Judge Emmons can be persuaded, and in extension Mr. Dalton and Mr. Merton. They weren't really blinded by the Solist ideology. Yes, those 3 don't seem to be working directly with Chief Justice Hawker. If we can get to Isabel Edmonds, we might get the 6 votes needed. That's our best bet. What are the demands? We should run down each of the main demands of the committee, said Lucian, and get your inputs first. Mrs. Mogner can explain them further. We'll start with the first red line. The new constitution will fix the loopholes regarding the president's absolute veto powers. Even though Mr. Richter put on a whole show about why vetoes should be completely removed, the committee has almost unanimously agreed on fixing the loopholes, thus limiting presidential vetoes. My suggestion is to add a clause detailing the methods the Assembly may override the veto, with some sort of supermajority. 1 person should never be able to block the rest, said Nia. We'll give up this power, otherwise we're not going to get anything done. Whatever you decide, it's important to get a balanced picture. We're making history by changing the 29 Constitution of Sol. The second one is about judiciary. The new constitution will remove the Supreme Court's right to vote on legislation. This is yet another point that was unanimously agreed on by all parties, said Nia. Tarquin Sol established a rule to protect his 29 Constitution. We all know most of the judges are still his pawns. Constitutional amendments will still be very difficult to accomplish with a reform like this, particularly because we will keep the 2/3 vote system to be able to propose a change. However, the judiciary will not have the final say in the amendments. It's already what we wanted to do. Yes, said Nia. This will ensure that there won't be another politically motivated Supreme Court. Apart from these two critical points, they also have other major demands. They want to reform the appointment procedures for the ministers. Mr. Richter clarified that the Assembly should have a say in the formation of the council members. That is something that a majority of our party also supports, said Petter. Well, Mr. Richter talked about abolishing the Member of Honour rights of Tarquin Sol. That gives him absolute immunity and makes him a permanent member of the Assembly, said Nia. Well, that one is a controversial one. I doubt the USP would like that. Immunity of the justices, the impeachment of the president, limited power of presidential decrees. All of this came up during the committee meeting, said Lucian. Yes, reformists expect big reforms, while our faction in the USP are not very keen on pushing change that are too great. I'd say keeping everything in the middle ground is the safest bet. No need to agitate anyone too much. Let's keep things small and manageable. Let's not give up too much. As long as we address the main issues, I also agree. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rain decides, we will need to work together to push on this agenda. Now we have a better picture of your intentions, sir. I will start reaching out to my contacts and make a draft that will work for us. I'll present your input to the committee, said Nia. In a few months, you would have the draft on your desk to make the final changes yourself. I think this is yet another fruitful meeting, sir, said Lucian. Thanks for the meeting, everybody. Thank you for your time, sir. Thank you, Anton. You have my support, Mr. President. I think this is where we'll call it, sir. Have a good day. They left the room. One new from Radical. WPB protests electoral bill. Growing discontent over the past electoral campaign finance bill, which has excluded public funding for parties that aren't able to enter the Grand National Assembly, has reached boiling point when all Workers' Party of Bludia officials and members went out in protest around the country. Strong voice of support came from Labour Union of Sordland and the People's Freedom and Justice Party, calling the bill unfair for most parties and an attack on our democratic principles. Hopefully we can get them in line. The new bill means that the WPB lost half their total party funding, and since they couldn't pass the high election threshold of 10% to enter the Assembly, aren't eligible at all to receive any public election funding for the 1957 elections. The WPB leader said that the workers' struggle continues and that they are willing to explore other options to be able to represent the hundreds of thousands of people that voted for them. For now, their struggle continues. President Rain and the USP establishment are actively seeking to suppress the political representation of the country. H3 construction plans. Saudi State Corporation has reported that preparatory work for H3 highway has already started, including clearing land and demolishing buildings in the path of a future roadway. Construction of the highway will be starting in the next months, working west from Lockhaven. Meeting with Chief Justice Orzo Hawker. The administration had been working day and night for the overwhelming amount of issues that were facing the country. The departments sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on new decisions that were taken. Forgive me, I appear to have a slight cough this morning, more than usual. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a moment. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Lucian had earlier told me that the Chief Justice wanted to speak to me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. Take a moment to relax. Thousands of shimmering lights in Hawthorne skyline were mesmerizing. Suddenly I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucian. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Lucian. I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir, he said. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it will probably be about the new constitution. He will be coming shortly with Judge Mr. Garassi to the meeting. We shouldn't take them lightly. Oh. We may be able to cooperate with them. I advise against that, sir. I do not trust the Chief Justice. We should... There were 3 knocks at the door. Lucian checked his watch. He looked rather worried. Olivia opened the door. Chief Justice Otto Hawker and Judge Heron Garassi entered the room. Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you, said Otto. Evening, said Heron. Welcome, Judge Justice Garassi and Chief Justice Hawker. Good to see you indeed. Also gestured at the surfer in his office. May I? Or in the office. Please. We all took seats on top of its sofas and made ourselves comfortable. How were your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. It's been busy, but I'm doing good. It will only get busier, yet I think you're doing a good job so far. Considering all that's happening around us, said Aaron. With the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our borders, he let out a deep sigh. A troubling time. We appreciate your concern, said Lucian. So, said Orso. You probably want to know why we're here. Please enlighten us, Mr. Hawker. We know you're working on a new constitution. The Supreme Court does not approve of this. With all due respect, the constitution needs to be updated, sir, said Lucian. I am sure you're well aware of the public demands and our circumstances. Is that so? Said Orso. I see that you are the one who is not aware of our actual circumstances. You want to make a weaker constitution in the midst of problems from both sides, inside and outside. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I will make sure it will not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear. You haven't even seen the proposal yet, Mr. Hawker. Isn't it too soon to be against it? Do you think I live on a rock, Mr. President? I know what goes on. Yet you, Mr. President, said Heron, seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Let us explain the reasons for our stance. Let's hear it. We are protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient and gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. Sordland has more important problems and threats that we should face right now. Instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution, we have a potential war within our borders. If you don't wish to nitpick, then don't nitpick. You only need to go along with what we're saying. Also signalled Heron with his hand to let him speak instead. Mr. President, I know that you're a busy man, so I will make this quick. We all know the Saudi security forces found stashes of Rumbergian weaponry in the hideouts of bloody separatists. Ka-74s are roaming inside Sordland at this moment. As much as Rumberg poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. It's not unprecedented to think that the Bloods will start their terror again with their new toys. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the support of the United Cortana. The chaos is imminent for Sordland. And finally, and sadly, said Osso, we don't see the administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you will not focus on military during your term. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost. Mr. Hawker, the court has no jurisdiction over these matters. Aren't we all part of the state, Mr. President, said Orso. We are all responsible if Sordland falls to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the armed Bloodish separatists have direct connections to the Workers' Party of Bloodia? Yeah, Ron knows that. You know what that means? Do you remember the vote of the Workers' Party in the last election? What is this all about? Asked Lucian. The only reason they are not in the Assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They have gotten quite big. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connection to the paramilitary Bloodish forces cannot be denied. And all of a sudden, the reformists are trying to decrease the electoral threshold so the Bloodish separatists can be legitimised and in the Assembly to reach their aims of independence. You think that's Mr. Richter's intention? I suspect his intentions are grander. But I wish the issues were only Bloodish terrorists and Rumberg. The reformists suggest changes would bring the communists, who are backed by United Cortana, into the Assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? Asked Herin Garasi. Yes, I see two old men who are desperate to cling on to their power. Sometimes you wish to keep your enemies close, and even listen to what they've got to say. Sometimes appeasing them. No. Sometimes working with them to a reasonable extent. Not appeasement, actually working with them. Can lower their threat. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. This is not a conspiracy theory. Haven't you been briefed by your security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well. We should be taking the necessary measures against communist and Bloodish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflict with Rumberg. And of course not fall into the traps of the reformists by listening to their demands. They are clearly plotting to weaken the President and our whole administration in order to exploit the system. Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, said Lucian, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous. The Chief Justice talked, Lucian. Of course, sir. The person in question is Mr. Franz Richter himself, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Arcasia. Arcasia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amidst a chaotic period in Sordland. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. This is why the Supreme Court will be doing what it can to stop these reforms and preserve the constitution. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Arcasia? Asked Lucian. Mr. Galad, we all know he has been in Arcasia many times, because it's been documented. But what would you think if he has been making hidden flights to the country? Please explain. He has been spotted in a hotel in Arcasia last year, where they held a conference on economic development in volatile regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that a constitution is the reason for everything bad, said also. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe he had a meeting with President Walker behind closed doors. Evidence? I only have your word here. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken in Arcasia, in different cities. One is from a couple of months back. Again, none of it is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Arcasian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too. How can any of these be undocumented? We don't know. Even if he used a private plane, we would be able to get information of his flights. That means he has people helping him from the inside. If this is accurate, he does. Many Solids were already following his leads for quite some time. Mr. President, I cannot give away their identities, said also. But I can give you the evidence. He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordish border guard, with highlighted dates that showed no trace of Franz Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken in the conference in Arcasia, as well as remarks by lesbian and Arcasian citizens who claimed to have seen him in Arcasian businessmen around the same dates. There was also an official transcript of one of his speeches when he claimed to be in Benfi on the dates of the conference in Arcasia where he was spotted. Do we know this is not doctored? Lucian skimmed through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned into surprise. These seem to be real. Of course they're real, Mr. Galard said also. These seem to suggest that Arcasia is behind the reformists, said also. Their demands will only benefit Arcasia. They want us to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Sordland. I bet Rumberg is part of their plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. You think Rumberg, United Cortana, and Acacia, three forces who don't support each other, are working together? Now you understand the reasons for our current stance, and also our suspicions about your advisors, who clearly have not given you this vital information. Lucian gave him a sharp look. We appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advised against jumping to conclusions right away. Still need to check the information. There's not much to think or check, said Osso. This is clearly an emergency. In such case, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency. I'm still too skeptical about these, Mr. Hawker. I will have to decline. It seems you're influenced by Mr. Gladway more than you think, said Osso. What is that supposed to mean, Mr. Hawker? Said Lucian. Why don't you explain your agenda yourself, Lucian? You are swaying the President to ignore the national security threats. I'm not swayed by anyone, Mr. Hawker. This is my own decision. Say what you will, history will prove us right once again. And if you believe you can enact these reforms, you are living in a land of dreams, said Heron. Sorry to upset you, gentlemen. Even though you are aware of our national security threats, said Osso, you are making a big mistake, Mr. President, said Heron. We will not allow you to succeed. Gentlemen, I think it's about time to end this meeting. Well, thank you for having us, Mr. President, said Osso. Have a good evening. They both left the room without saying anything else. That was not good. They clearly tried to threaten you. We have to make sure our I'm not scared of them. Also, we'll be doing whatever it takes to damage you. We need to be careful. There are still many old guards sympathizing in the party. Don't let them divide our party, and he will definitely try. After a short evaluation of the situation on our hands, Lucian left me in the presidential office. It was obvious that the old guards would be my main rivals in the near future. If this is accurate, then I have to question Lucian, as well as what else is going on. But I don't know if this is accurate currently. Hawker in Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Also Hawker has been spotted entering Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of this visit, that is happening right after the increased conversations around the so-called democratic reform. Historically, Mr. Hawker usually does not frequent the palace unless for official business, and this was certainly an unplanned visit. Clearly there must be something he wants out of this. Our speculation is that he has something to do with reforms. More of this come later. I would like to have an investigator, not part of the state, look into what's going on. That may not be possible. Well, I see we reached the continue part. Continuing to the next turn. And we shall indeed continue next time. I've been Yorkie the Talespinner, you've been a fine audience. If you wish to click the like, subscribe and comment, that would be even better. Very well.